What's going on, everybody? Welcome to my channel. Just getting my coffee together because we're gonna have some fun today. We're gonna be doing some critiques here. I asked my community both on my YouTube channel and also on my Facebook page hold on, there we go, to submit some of their photos, their favorite portraits that they've ever taken, to go ahead and submit those, not just for feedback for themselves, but also to help you all who are watching to learn how to take better portraits and just take better photos in general. Some of you may or may not know this, but over the course of the last few years, I have done events where I have had to be a judge for photos. And as a judge, I even felt like I learned a lot about photography and I learned a ton about taking better portraits. And so that's what I'm hoping that you all will get the opportunity to do today as well. So a couple of housekeeping things. The photos that we're going to be looking at here in a few moments, these are photos that were submitted. Everyone said, perfectly fine, give me feedback on these photos. But we're going to do it with a little bit of structure. I've done critiques in the past and just kind of gave my feedback, my overall impression on the images. But I think a better takeaway on top of that feedback is to really understand what the elements of a great portrait and what a great image in general, what makes that, right? So before we get into that, I want to ask you all who are watching right now, leave a comment. Let me know where you are watching from and what time is it where you're watching. I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Orlando, Florida. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I see Christopher Reed is here. And yeah, let me know where y'all are watching from. Also, let me know how the audio sounds, if it's too loud, too quiet. I want to make sure that I don't have any weird audio issues before we get too crazy with this today. So let's see. Wow. All right. So Poland, Seattle, Tallahassee. Oh, you're right around the corner. Watching from San Diego, Austin, Texas, my old home state of Connecticut. What's up? Germany, Spain, Nigeria, Nashville, UAE. Says audio is peaking a little. All right, let me fix that. Here we go. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Let me know. Houston, Dubai, Miami, Pasadena, Texas, Kansas City. We got New Jersey in the house, Ireland, Hungary. Wow. So we've got an international audience. This is wonderful. This is fantastic. All right. So a couple of things here. Let me see if I can share this window. Let's see. Okay. Hang tight here because this is the first time I'm streaming from this computer. So let's see. Here we go. Just gotta. There we go. All right. Google Chrome. Yep. To your screen until it is quit. All right, hang tight, everybody. I'm going to do a little reset here, but I'll be back in 2 seconds. Hold on. All right. We back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. All right. So let's see if this is going to work here. Share screen. All right. Chrome tab. Let's go there and share. Okay. So this is the kind of like the format that I'm going to be using for looking at today's images as much as possible. Because again, it's really easy for me to be able to go in and just say, you know, I think this is good or this can be improved or whatever the case might be. Whenever I go to a conference or anything where I'm having to judge photos, they print this out for us as judges. Most of us know what this is because we've done this a bunch of times, and so we know what to look for. But for those of you who may have not seen this before, if you go on and Google search um, PPA judging criteria, you'll be able to access this site. And I would highly recommend to you to look at this and to really just like engrave this into your memory, because this is really the elements of a great photo. So we're going to go along as we're looking at photos, and I'm going to be kind of judging it against some of these different elements that would be something that would qualify for what they call a meriting image. So the meriting image, basically what that means is when you go to the competition, depending on what competition you're going to, if you get over, let's say, a score of an 80, then your image will qualify for a merit, which means that it basically goes into like what you would call the playoffs, right? So you have like your regular season where all the photos are coming in, you're looking at them. Anything that scores over an 80 will go into this meriting criteria. So just to get an 80 on a photo is like a good thing, because that means you took a good image, it merited, wonderful. However, it goes into this playoff where basically they'll look and they'll say, okay, out of these images, these are the ones that are first, second, third place, whatever the case might be. So the elements that they're looking for are impact. So of course, that's, you know, kind of one of those things that's very personal, because obviously looking at a photograph may impact you, but may not impact me, and vice versa. But it is one of the things that, you know, is kind of intrinsic in a great image. Whether that makes us sad, happy, angry, or anything in between, if it has some kind of visual impact, that's a good thing, right? Technical excellence. This is something that I think a lot of people are, you know, striving to get when they, you know, go into photography. So things like retouching, sharpness, exposure, printing, basically all the nuts and bolts of just taking a well-crafted image kind of fall into this category. Third one being creativity. Don't really have to talk very much about that, but you know, it gives you what that outline is. Style, I'll just go through these quickly. Composition, presentation, color balance, center of interest, which is a big one. I'll probably be talking about this quite a bit. Your lighting, y'all, if you watch my channel, you all know I'm big on lighting, so I will probably critique that maybe a little bit more than some other people might. Subject matter, technique, and storytelling. So these are all things that, you know, for me and really for anyone going into these competitions, this is what people are looking for when it comes to critiquing images. So take that off. All right. With that being said, let us take a look at the first set of images here. And let's see, stop screen. All right. This time we're going to share. There we go. Okay. All right, let me move this over here. Cool. Now I could see everything. You wouldn't believe it, but doing these live streams, trying to get this set up, you'd think it's like a really quick thing, like just turn on your laptop and start streaming. It's a production, folks. So listen, if you're watching this right now, do me a favor, leave a like on this live stream, because it takes time to get this set up so that you all will have a good experience. So with that being said, what I ended up doing was I imported a number of images here into Lightroom. And the images here that have been loaded up, I'm going to go through them one by one. If a Instagram handle was left on the photo, then I have their Instagram basically where it says their, you know, the file name .jpeg. It would show their Instagram handle. In this case, I didn't see one, so I just have the person's name. So this one was submitted by Arnab Ghosh. Sorry if I beat up the name here. And so looking at this image, a few things. So I can see the settings here, f11, 1/125th of a second, ISO 400. So I'm going to assume that this image was likely taken with a speed light, especially at f11, or with some kind of studio strobe. So from a lighting perspective, it's interesting. From a style perspective, the way that this was treated in post, it's interesting, right? It's got some impact to it, just in the way that the image is presented to us as viewers, and to me as the viewer. I like the way this is treated. I like the texture that was added to it. It's an interesting image. It makes me want to look at it. So that's the positive thing that I see going for this shot. Some things that I personally kind of take me out of the image a little bit is that when you have the fabric draped over the face like that and it's closest to the camera, my eye goes to the fabric first and then it goes over to her face. For those of you who are looking at this and maybe you're from some other part of the world, maybe you read your images from like right to left visually. I read my images from left to right visually. So as I look at this from left to right, I see fabric, then I see the face. That brings a little bit of a challenge to the person viewing this image or to anyone viewing this image, because they may not stick around long enough to take out what you have put into this image, right? So what I personally would have recommended is maybe taking the opposite side of the fabric and then draping it over the face that way, if that's the like the mood and the vibe and the mystery that you're going for. I would have just swapped sides potentially, or I would have had her maybe turn her face so that the fabric was in the back, right? There's a few different ways to be able to do that, but from a lighting perspective, it looks cool. The post-processing looks cool. For me, I feel like there would be more impact if that fabric was on the opposite side. But listen, let me know in the comments. And as I'm giving feedback and critiquing these images, I know you all have opinions on these shots too. So by all means, leave your feedback in the comments as well. Be respectful, be courteous, because if you're not, you're going to get banned. So don't play like that. We're all adults here for the most part. So make sure that you're being respectful as you're giving your feedback and critiques on these images. And even beyond that, of course, this photo doesn't have an Instagram handle attached, but many other photos do. So I would highly encourage you, you know, as a community here, when they have an Instagram handle attached, by all means, go check out their Instagram profiles, give them a follow. You know, this is all family here on my YouTube channel and in my Facebook group, which I am live streaming on my Facebook group. If you're not a part of that, if you're a member of Facebook, go on to Facebook and search for Improve Your Photography. You'll see my Facebook page there. Join. Make sure you answer the questions. If you don't answer, I probably will not look at it and just glance over it. But yeah, make sure you join the group as well, because in the future, there's going to be future live streams where all of the images that are being submitted are coming through that group. So please sign up. Anyway, so that's our first shot. Let's go ahead and move on to our next one here, which was submitted by Mike Baltiera photo. Might have beaten that one up as well. Sorry. This one, really interesting shot. Settings are still attached to this. So it was shot with a 50mm lens, f2.8, 1/125th of a second, ISO 100. So my first feeling on this photo is that there's impact to this shot. It feels very, what's the word I'm looking for? It feels very painterly is really the first thing that kind of comes to my mind. It feels like the kind of portrait that, like, you know, back in the day, you know, when people had castles and stuff like that, like he would probably have this as like a big, you know, image over his fireplace or something like that in his man cave. Like it just feels like that type of a portrait, you know, that would be displayed in that manner. So retouching was really nice. The lighting looks great. Really nothing to say from a technical perspective. It looks great. Didn't go too crazy with the processing, which it would be very easy when you get an image like this to just go ham on it in Lightroom or in post-production in general. A couple of things that I would kind of say, for me, I'm very big when it comes to portraiture on expressions. You know, this gentleman, whoever it is, has got a great face, a lot of character. Of course, he's got a great beard. And if you follow my work, you know, I'm a big fan of photographing people that have great beards. And he's got that in spades. So kudos to the subject here. But his eyes to me and the way that he's standing, there's a little bit of a disconnect to me. He's got a certain level of, I don't know if it's borderline intensity or if it's borderline like what I would call the deer in the headlights look, where it's kind of like they're looking at you, but they're not engaged with you, right? There's a little bit of a difference between, for example, if I'm looking at the camera and I'm doing this versus doing this, right? There's a different level of engagement. One is like I'm looking directly through the camera, and I'm here, but I'm not here. And the other one is I'm looking at you as the audience. I try very hard in my portraits, and I would recommend to everyone in photographing people, try to make sure that you're getting that engagement with the camera. Oftentimes that doesn't happen with the first or second, or even like the first 20 or 30 images that you take. Sometimes you have to shoot with them for 10, 15 minutes, before they open up and they start, you start talking to them and you're guiding them. This is what I want. These are the kind of poses. These are the kind of expressions. Usually that's the conversation that you're having over the course of a photo shoot. And eventually they start to dial it in. They get more comfortable in front of the camera. And then they really start hammering those like really good looks and expressions to the lens. So this would be one for me where I love a lot of this, like a lot that's going on with this image. I just think that the eyes, if they were a little bit just deadlocked into the camera and just a little bit more intense, if that's like his mouth is pursed a little bit, so it looks like he's got kind of a little bit of intensity to him. So yeah, just kind of focus on the expression, focus in on the eyes. Even as I look at this image right now, like if I just look directly into his eyes, I don't think he's looking at me. Like he's looking over my shoulder or looking through me. He's not, for me as the viewer, he's not looking at me. And maybe y'all can look at this. Let me know in the comments. Tell me, say, Miguel, you crazy. He's looking directly at me. But I'm looking at this on my screen and he doesn't look like he's looking directly at me. It looks like he's looking through me. So that's really the only big critique. I mean, the hands in the pockets are kind of casual. That's the other semi disconnect for me, is that he's got kind of an intense look, but he's got his hands in his pockets. So maybe just adjusting the body, adjusting his hands a little bit in this shot might make for a bit of an interesting change. Maybe having the hands crossed and looking at the camera, something to that effect, could also be kind of cool. But with all that said, I like this image a lot. Like, again, if I knew this dude and I went to his house, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw this, like, hung and printed over his, fireplace if he had one. So really, really nice shot, Mike. And good job. Keep it going. Let's go to the next one here. By the way, again, let me know in the comments what y'all think, if y'all agree, disagree. This next image from Robert Gordon Photo on Instagram. This was really nice shot here. Shot at f4, 1/1250th of a second, ISO 100. Really, really interesting shot here. So just tilting my screen back because I got a little bit of glare. All right, so a few things. Visually striking is kind of the first thing that comes to mind for me. It's a nice graphic, like it's a catchy shot, not just because of the subject, but the way that the colors are saturated, the vibrance of the image overall, it stops you, right? It's simple. You have a simple background, simple foreground. I don't know if this was planned or not, but the color of her bathing suit with the hat and the glasses, I'm sure it is, because everything just, is cohesive. So whoever styled this, kudos. Whoever decided to style this and choose this exact spot to take this photo, kudos, because it was the right choice. So a couple of things. Let's talk about how we can make a shot like this better. So it looks like this was lit with possibly daylight, sun, and it looks good. Hard light in a shot like this looks really good. The retouching wasn't crazy. It wasn't over the top. So that's good. Um, there's two things here that I see for me that, and this is not to say this is not a good image because this is great. But there's two things for me that if I took this shot, if I'm looking through my viewfinder, I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm going to change this one thing and it may be better or it may not be. And if it's not, that's okay because you got two variations of it. The first thing would be her hand. So if you see her hand, she's holding her hat and her hand is open towards the camera. I may have had her turn that hand in a little bit. So instead of having it out, just, holding the hat and turning it in, because you're showing the widest part of the hand and it also catches light when it's really wide. So, or when it's open like that. So, in a hard light situation, you don't want the hand to basically become this like distracting element. And if we make the hand smaller by turning it sideways, it's a very easy thing to do. The other thing is I'm going to hit R here. Composition wise, I like this. I feel like I would like this shot a little bit more if it was positioned a little bit more to the right, so that instead of having the negative space here on the right side of the image, that it would actually be on the left side, only because that's the direction that she's kind of like got her face tilted towards. So this same shot, just with her moved over to the right, so that it intersects with this point here on the rule of thirds grid, and just leaving the negative space on this side and having her take her hand and just do one of those numbers on it, that would be cool. That would be really cool. But again, other than that, and that's again being very nitpicky, this is a great image, and sometimes it's one of those things where good photography, it's like a game of inches, right? It's not like, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that to take a great shot. It's just make this one little adjustment and, it's going to make a big difference. So those two things I would say would take this image from being like a really nice image to being like really great image. So definitely some things to consider. Thank you for submitting that photo. And let's move on here to our next shot. Yeah, and y'all are leaving some good feedback in the comments, so I appreciate that. All right, so let's take a look at this next shot here. So this is photograph Don Price on Instagram. And yeah, it's funny. This morning I woke up in Orlando and it's like, I think it was in the 50s this morning, which is not, at this time of year, it's kind of cold in Orlando. But I'm seeing this and I'm like, man, I came to work today to my studio in this and like a t-shirt and shorts. But it feels like winter. So I see this photo and I'm like, yeah, it's about that time of year. So really nice, really well done portrait here, winter photo, f2.8, 1/125th of a second, ISO 400. It looks like, let me see, looks like it might have been lit somehow, just looking at the catch lights of the eyes, because I see these bright spots in the eyes. So maybe this was done with a strobe or an LED, not 100% sure. The only reason that I'm suspecting this was lit is because you could see that the sun is in the back. You see it's kind of dark in the midground. And then in the foreground with the subject, she's really bright. So it's either a reflector, flash. I don't know if you're in the chat. Let us know if I'm on the money or not. But yeah, exposure wise, it looks pretty good. Styling wise, it looks pretty good. Keep a couple things in mind here. The first thing being that you want to be really, really careful with trees in the background, just to make sure that, especially when there's a lot of branches and stuff like that, that it's not creating distractions behind your subject, especially behind their face. I'm not going to say this image does that, but it's really close. And you just want to be super careful to where the branches aren't taking us out of the image and taking us not just out of the image, but taking us away from the subject, which, is a great subject. Couple of other things here too, which is that in terms of the pose and the expression, be really, really careful with having arms crossed or having them crossed across the belly. I get that it's cold and she's trying to go for that like snuggly vibe. But you really got to sell that snuggly vibe, not just with the way your arms are crossed, but also with the face. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect there for me. I'm usually not a fan of like having poses where the arms are crossed, across the body like that. Just in general, I'm not saying it doesn't work because I've seen it work before, but you just got to be really careful, really specific, really intentional with how you do that. The other thing here, and this is something that I'm going to be probably talking about quite a bit because several photos that came through had this element, if you want to call it that, in the portrait. And that has to do with the way the eyes are positioned in this image. So for me as the viewer, I see this photo, great subject, great, location, great vibe, right? And then she's looking away from the camera. And she's not only looking away, but she's looking like far off because her eyes are like way off in the corner of her sockets. When I do my portrait sessions, especially if I'm working with somebody who's not a model, this happens all the time. There's a little bit of a level of comfort. And this goes back even to the second image that we looked at. There's a certain level of comfort that a subject will have in front of the camera the longer that they stay in front of the camera. So that's where I'm saying, like, if you have a photo shoot, the first 10, 15 minutes, they're just warming up. They're just loosening up. You're probably going to have the highest concentration of portraits where the person is not engaged with the camera in those first 10 to 15 minutes. To me, this feels like great subject, great location, great vibe, but she's not engaged with the camera and she's looking so far away that I'm out of the photo. Like I'm out of this moment. I'm not with her, as the viewer. I'm looking at this and she's looking away. And think about it like this. If she was standing in front of you in person, right now in front of us, and she was looking away like this, what would you read from that photo? What would you read from her posture? What would you read from her body language? I'm reading that she's not interested in this photo shoot. So how this would be fixed would be that if she is going to look away from the camera, what I would say is wherever her nose is pointing, her eyeballs should be going in that same direction. Okay. So, and I've talked about this in some of my videos. This is a prime example, and don't feel bad because there's multiple photos that were submitted that were like this, that are beautiful photos. But then when you really look at them and you start to say, like, what is this person saying to me in this photo? That's where it's like, oh, it could have been that little bit better. But for me, that's the biggest thing. I would tell them, look, so if their nose is pointing this way, I don't want their eyes to go way off this way. I want the eyes to go this way. Right. And if they're looking off camera, why are they looking off camera? Right. If they're looking off camera, are they looking hopeful? Are they looking longingly? Are they looking like, what's the narrative? What's the story? Sometimes there isn't one. Sometimes they're just vibing and they're just posing and doing their thing. And that's cool. But sometimes you have to give them a story. You got to give them a narrative. You got to get them to play a little bit of a character so that you're adding purpose for why they are looking somewhere else besides us as the viewer. So that's really the biggest thing. From a technical perspective, I think this is a really nicely done shot. I'm seeing in the chat here, it was lit on an 8200 and dome diffuser. Yeah. So that was my thoughts exactly. Like this was a lit shot. And so from a lighting perspective, technically, this is really nice. It doesn't feel flashy, right? And sometimes we run into that where we go do location stuff and it just like, it feels flashy. In this case, this doesn't feel flashy. It doesn't feel like it was lit with a flash. It almost feels like it could be natural light. Obviously it's not, but the one other thing, and this is just me just thinking off the top of my head. So you have this warm light in the far background, right? Just looking at how warm the light is on the trees in the far background. Then the mid ground is a little bit cooler, and then she's a little bit warmer. That might be the only other thing that I would maybe play around with in post. If we're trying to go for this, like, it's cold outside and we want this kind of warm vibe to it, we need to be a little bit more cohesive with the color temperature of the overall image. Because usually when you're in, like, if you're in a shady area, the light is going to be a little bit cooler for the most part, but your lights here are warm. So again, that's really nitpicky. Most people would be like, yeah, whatever. But just keep that in mind, because in this case, it's not too bad, but there may be other circumstances where maybe you're not thinking about it and it might come back and be like, oh, dang, I wish I would have done that. But otherwise, this is a really nice image. Like, you kept it under control. It's well exposed. Like I said, just those little few things that would take this image from being like a nice portrait to just being like a really great image. So well done, Photograph Don Price. Thank you for submitting. And let's see. So had some questions. I'm just going to the chat here really quick. Sean was asking, he says, hello, love your work, Miguel. Thank you. Appreciate that. How do we share photos for your review? So what I ended up doing was I posted in my community here on YouTube, and then I also posted on my Facebook group, which is Improve Your Photography. It's linked in the description of this live stream. So I'd highly recommend and invite you join the group, because in the future, when I do these critiques, that's going to be how I get people to join in on that. So we've already had our photos submitted, but maybe, I don't know, depending on how long it takes for me to go through these, maybe I'll take a few more. But as of now, I think we've got our hands full, but I appreciate that. All right, so Daniel John Harris is the next photo we're going to look at here. And this image, f2.0, 1/320th of a second, ISO 100. So clearly a studio lit headshot. So first impressions, wow, like, it's really nicely lit. I don't know, maybe y'all know this, maybe you don't, but I am a huge fan of catch lights. And the catch lights are really just those reflections of the lighting and the reflectors that might be in the scene. And catch lights are popping here. So I'm a happy man as a photographer. I see this and I like it. I love the fact that her eyes are literally the first thing that my eyes gravitate towards. This looks to me more like a headshot for an actor or actress or something of that nature. And if you're in the chat, let us know, what that is with the photo. So few things. Love the gray background. Love the outfit. Everything about this from a lighting perspective looks really nice. It's really well done. Composition. Yeah, I always like putting up the rule of thirds grid, because when I shoot these images, I typically have that turned on my camera, and it just kind of helps to, guide the image. I usually like to have the eyes lined up somewhere closer to this top line of the rule of thirds grid, but that's where the catch lights come into play, because that helps, right? If it's not composed in such a way to where you're forcing people to look, where they maybe by nature would want to look, you're doing it by controlling the light in the eyes, which is great. So a couple of things here for me. The first one being that the retouching. So she looks like she's got great skin. I would just say that because these highlights are so bright on this side of her face, I would maybe tone that down, maybe like a third of a stop. Maybe that might even be too much. Like, just take the light that's on that camera right side and just dial it down just the slightest little bit, because it's very bright. And so what ends up happening is, when you have really bright highlights and you try retouching a portrait like this or a headshot like this, even if it's not overly retouched, it's going to appear to be more retouched, because the exposure on the face is brighter. And especially in comparison to the other side of the face, which is not as bright, which is fine. But it tends to make the image look over retouched, even if it's not, right? And I'm not going to zoom into this, but my initial feeling is that it's either A, it's the main light's just a tiny bit too bright, and because of that, it lends me to believe that maybe the photo might be a little bit over retouched, even if it's not. So just keep in mind that main light, just maybe tweak it down just a little teeny tiny bit. Um, the only other thing I would say too is maybe the face or her head, if it was tilted a little bit towards camera left side, that might be a little tiny bit more engaging to me. But again, now I'm nitpicking, right? Because the shot is really nice. Maybe you had some of those in the sequence of shots, but just kind of having, instead of it being this way, just tilt it a little bit more this way. Or just have it straight on, just have, like, if she's like this and she's straight on like that, that's cool too. Right. But she's still got a little bit of a head tilt this way. So again, if I'm reading the image from left to right, like my gaze is just kind of falling out of this side of the image, versus if her head was straight up, or if it's leaned up against the left side of the image, I'm hanging a little bit more visually on the shot. Again, really nitpicky. I'm sure that, if I was to take this headshot and give it to the person, if they were a client, they're going to be happy with it. So kudos, really, really nice shot. Again, just that main light, play with that a little tiny bit more. And I think you're on the right track. Like, this is a really well done headshot. So thank you, Daniel, for submitting that. Now we've got our next image here from Chris Reed. And let's see, this was taken with an 85 millimeter f1.6, 1/640th of a second at ISO 100. All right. So when we're talking about concepts and ideas, like, this is what I'm talking about. This is fun, right? Really, really fun moment. What is that called? Is that live action role playing? Like, that's what it feels like to me. Funny enough, I was doing a video for, I think it was for the FX30 that came out, or it's coming out in a little bit. So I'm at this park and I'm doing like videos and testing it and all this kind of stuff. And I see this like couple come out of the car, and it seemed like it was late. It was probably like, I don't know, 9 o'clock. And I see them coming out of the car, like real casual or whatever. And then I see like the kid pull out this giant shield and a sword that was like made out of wood. And then the lady pulled out some attire and pulled out like a similar thing. And they went out to like this little park area, and they had like this like battle. And it's so funny because I see this photo and it reminds me of that. Like, I watched the entire sequence of them pulling up, because I'm just standing there while the video is going. So I'm just like waiting for this, time lapse to finish doing its thing. I see them pull up and get out of the car real casual and get their stuff and then go out, and they're just like duking it out, in this park. It was so funny. But this kind of reminds me of that. So a couple of things. I love that element of it. There's definitely like some, I don't know, kind of like a cinematic feel to this, like a play. The attire is great. The expressions of the subject, like they're selling this, this battle. Couple of things for me that I think would make this a little bit better. Because her sword is kind of like completely sideways, I can't see it from far away. Like, if I'm back here, I'm at about arm's length away from my monitor. So, and most people who are seeing your images, they're probably going to be, even if I bring it in, if I put my face a little bit closer, I can see it. But if I back away, I can't see that she's holding a sword in her hand. Part of that could be because of the exposure of the image. Part of it could be because of the way that the blade is angled towards the camera. I see him really well because he's got the white mask and it's reflecting a lot of the light. And I assume this is an off-camera flash shot just based off of the lighting. So from a lighting perspective, the lighting looks really good, like really well done. But because his white mask is capturing a lot of that light, I'm going first to his face. And then I kind of like scope out the rest of the image. The bottom being really dark, I don't know that I would have had so much of the image. That's probably a good 20% of the image that's like really dark, really underexposed. I would maybe consider cropping this, and I'm not going to do it because I don't like doing that to people's images, but I would maybe crop it from like the bottom 20%, just crop that out. That way it pulls the viewers in a little bit closer to what's happening to the action. And let me see, let me zoom in. Yeah, I see his hat dropped. Yeah, so that's one of the things, and see what I'm talking about with the sword, how it's like sideways. So like, if it was just rotated a little tiny bit, maybe the light would have hit the sword and it would have been, a little bit more visually noticeable that she's swinging a sword at this guy. But yeah, like I say, from a lighting perspective, it's a cool shot, cool moment, great attire, great wardrobe. When it comes to the storytelling side of things, like sometimes, and this happens to me often, you've got all these other elements in place that are working really well. And you take that first shot and you're just like, yes, the lighting looks good. They look good. We're done. We're done here, right? As a photographer. But we have to tell the story, and we have to make sure that everything in terms of the story is being represented to the very best that it could possibly be represented. And so this would be one of those situations where I see this and I'm like, how could I show this even better? And maybe it might be you're shooting with an 85. Maybe it might be shooting with something like a 24-70 and getting in a little bit closer and shooting it wide and maybe playing with the angle of like, how high you are, right? Like I might be shooting up at this. Like, whose perspective are we seeing right now? We're seeing the perspective of somebody who may have walked in on this, which is fine. But I think it would be kind of cool to see it from his perspective, right? Like just getting a little bit lower and looking up and having her like swinging the sword down, little things like that could be a little bit more of just like, this could be one image in a sequence of a bunch of images where maybe you get that kind of shot. But seeing this on its own, I might have chosen to get closer with a wider lens and shoot it that way than to be farther away with an 85 and then have that negative space at the bottom that's not really like, it's not doing much for the image. Unless he had like a sword in the foreground or something that he couldn't reach. Like, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, from a technical perspective, lighting is great. Styling is great. Make those few little adjustments. And I think that from a storytelling perspective, I think it will be even that much better. So great job, Chris. Got another Chris, Creative Chris with a 1, submitted this photo. And so again, from a lighting perspective on this, and this one doesn't have the exit date. Oh, actually, it does. So 90 millimeter f4, 1/250th of a second, ISO 100. And Chris, let's see, Chris Reed Photography. Good. Okay. Got that in the chat. So that's perfect. So for this particular shot, I like the black on black, right? Sometimes that's kind of a challenging thing to do, to have like a darker color background with a subject with dark hair, wearing a dark top. Like that could be a really tricky thing to try to light. So from just a technical perspective, getting this type of shot to where the hair is not completely blending into the background and that their outfit's not blending into the background, exposure wise, that was great. There's a few things for me here that I would say could be areas of opportunity. The first one would be that, and yeah, I'm playing with my screen here just to see if maybe it's just me. Maybe y'all could tell me in the chat if you see it too, but I feel like there's a little bit of haloing that's happening around her head. And I would venture to guess that's because in the edit, maybe, and again, it could be wrong, but maybe the hair was blending into the background. And so in order to create that separation, you go in the raw file and you start, you lift the exposure of the hair and then you kind of mask it. That's one way that you could fix that, but you got to be really precise with your mask, because if not, you get this haloing around the head. And then, it's kind of like, well, why she got a halo, right? Well, what's up with that? So that's the first thing for me is just to look out for that. Second thing that I would look out for is in terms of hotspots. So a part of me, as I look at this image, my eyes and your viewers' eyes in general, they're going to go to the brightest part of the image. So if I look at this shot, to me, the brightest part of the image is like right, it's her chest, right? So her eyes look awesome though, right? You've got the hair draped over the face in a portrait. And again, this is generally speaking, you want your viewers to go to the subject's face first, right? Here it's going to her chest, and then it kind of like goes up. The next brightest thing is like on her forehead. So yeah, it's one of those things where you have to be really careful where you choose to light your subject. If that's what you're going for, cool. But for a portrait, I really try to make sure that the brightest part is the face, just so that the viewer's eyes go directly there. The other thing too, and this kind of goes to the first image that we looked at, you notice again that to the closest part of the camera, so if I'm reading this image from left to right, you've got the hair draped over that side of the face, and then you've got the eye on the right-hand side. I would have loved to have seen the hair be a little bit different. Maybe have, again, the other side of her head, have that hair draped over on that side. Just because for me, reading it from left to right, I don't know. And then especially with the hair blending into the background, it looks like she has half of a face. Yeah, this is a tough one. That would really be the biggest things that I would say. Just kind of look out for that. And it could very well be that maybe you need to add a little bit of a separation light, right? Add like a little kicker light to light her hair on the camera left side. But, other than that, again, this is a really tough shot. Like if you've never photographed a brunette with a black top on a black or a really dark background, it's a battle to make sure that everything is exposed properly so that they don't end up being like a floating head, right? That's what ends up happening 9 times out of 10. You photograph somebody in this type of situation, and they're just like a floating face or a floating body. And that's not what we're going for, right? That didn't happen here. It just needs to be adjusted a little bit in post in terms of how you process the raw to get rid of the haloing. And then again, just keeping in mind that, again, other parts of the world might be different. Here, I read from left to right. And as I'm reading the image from left to right, I hit shoulder first, I hit the face, but it's covered by hair. I even think this image would have been perfectly fine without the hair over the face. Like what it's already, she's got the leather top, like there's already a lot of mystery. She's killing it with the expression. And that's another thing for me is like seeing the eyes and seeing the mouth, how she's posing right now and how she's emoting to the camera. And then her face is covered. And I'm just like, oh man, she's got like a killer expression, but I can't see it because she's got hair on her face. So if there is hair on the face, and that's the story we're going for, just sell it. You know what I mean? Y'all hear me? Do y'all feel where I'm coming from? Let me know in the comments, in the chat, if I'm just like talking to myself right now. But that's how I'm feeling with this kind of a shot. Like it's a beautiful shot. It's really well done. Just kind of play around with those two elements. Just making sure that you're not, haloing the person, and also making sure that if there's any hot spots on the person, that the hot spots are where you want it. And yeah, it's the biggest thing. Thanks for submitting. Let's move on to the next one here at Portraits by BQ. And it's actually just Portraits by BQ. She submitted a few photos, and so I numbered them. And I actually have, let me see. So, no, hold on. Let me see if I can do this. All right, so I'm just going to show the one for now, and then I'm going to show the second one, And I told everybody just submit one photo. And so I know the person who submitted this photo, and she submitted a few. And I picked one to show you, which was one that I'm going to critique. Then I'm going to show you the other one just to make a point, which is a point that I made earlier. But anyway, before we do that, it's at Portraits by BQ without the 2 on Instagram. So this photograph here, really nice. This is, I don't have the settings here for the shot, but great styling. You know, model is in an interesting spot. Lighting looks interesting. Looks like this may possibly have been a natural light shot. And if it was with a flash, it's very subtle, which is good given the environment. I love the styling on the model. I love the expression that she's giving. The whole shot, the whole vibe. Like, I did a video with Jessica Cabasi a while ago, and she was teasing me because she's like, we were at the beach, and there were these like little trees basically next to the beach, and she's like, oh, I feel like if I was you, I'd put the model somewhere in this bush and photograph them. And I was like, heck yeah, that's actually exactly what I would do. So when I see her in like the foliage and all that, I'm like, yeah, if I walked by and I saw that, like, I would have her do something in that fit the vibe, you know? And so for me, this has like an editorial type of vibe. You know, again, just really well done, really well edited. Exposure was controlled really nicely. So all of that, great. Things I personally would look to maybe just kind of play with a little bit is very much like the other shot. Whatever the brightest part of the image is where your eyes, where the eyes of your viewer are going to go. So for me, the brightest exposure that I could see is, again, right on the side of her bathing suit on her chest. That is by far the brightest part of the image. Maybe secondarily would be like these these giant leaves, maybe a little bit on her hand. She's got some highlights and stuff on the forehead, but even the exposure on the side there is really bright. So if I kind of squint my eyes a little bit, the brightest parts that I can see is the sky, that leaf, and the side of her chest. So be very careful how you control this light, right? That might be something where you might have to diffuse the light a little bit with the inside of a 5-in-1 reflector. This might be one where maybe you just need to add a little bit of extra light on the face, whether it be through a reflector, off-camera flash, whatever the case might be, just so that you bring up the exposure just a tiny, tiny bit on the face, or knock down the exposure on the other stuff that's super bright that you don't want people to look at. So that, personally for me, that's really kind of the biggest thing. The other thing too is her eyes. She's got her eyes. She's looking like this at the camera, and it's a very like fierce expression. I hate to use the word fierce because I feel like that's just one of those photography words that are just like overused at some point. But she's got a very fierce expression, which is cool. But because her eyes are kind of light colored, right? If I zoom in here, you could see the reflector, or there's something white that's creating this gorgeous catch light in the eye. But she has really dark makeup around her eyes, and then her eyes are light, they're blue. So when you zoom out and you see this image from far away, the whites of her eyes are more dominant than the color of her eye. So for me, looking at this, and again, some viewers might not see it this way. I see it this way because my eyes are weird. But if I look at this image, it looks like she's rolling her eyes into the back of her head, because I see more white and I can't see the color of her eyes from far away. So again, this is one of those things where, just like I said on one of the prior images, wherever the nose is pointing, I would have their eyes going the same way. So that way the eye is centered and you see the color. Or again, just pump some light, reflector, whatever the case might be on the face. That could also help a little bit too, just so that it's more defined. But again, being very nitpicky, because if I take this shot, I'd be really happy with it, right? Really beautiful shot, great location, great model, great styling. technically really well done. This is one of those things where these few adjustments will take it from being, again, a really nice image to just like a really great shot. So well done. Now I'm going to show the other photo that you submitted, only to highlight a point that I made earlier. So same person took this photograph, and great subject. Again, great lighting. The styling is cool. You're doing a great job when it comes to that. I don't know if you're styling these on your own, whatever the case might be, but the styling on this is really cool. But the eyes, talked about this on one of the other images, and there's some other shots here that this is going to come up, I believe. But you want to make sure, again, like she's got great expression, great lighting, great everything, but she's looking away for some reason. And given the it's a beauty pose that has been coming up lately, where it's just like pulling back the skin becomes this like thing that models do, and it's fine, it looks great. But when they're looking off camera like that, it doesn't hold me as the viewer. It doesn't hold my attention. So this to me would have been stellar had she just looked at the camera and just worked the expressions with her eyeballs looking directly at the camera. So for those of you watching, this is going to be big throughout the majority of the shots that I'm looking at. And that's just my nitpickiness when it comes to portraits, is that I always feel that the beginning of a portrait session always starts with the most reluctance, I guess, for the subject to give the photographer the best expressions and the best looks. And they oftentimes will avoid engaging with the camera, whether it be through shyness, whether it be through lack of experience, whatever the case might be. I need the subject to become really good friends with the camera, really good friends with the lens. And then by extension, if that happens, they're looking at the camera and they're just like slaying it when it comes to the looks. So this is one where I wish she was looking at the camera, but all that put aside, everything else, it's a really, really nice shot. So very, very well done. Let's move on to the next one here. And this is at Shot by Sanchez on Instagram. And so a few things. I like the lighting on this. Obviously, this feels like a Halloween, inspired photo shoot, like a Halloween theme. So like having the red background with the black outfit, with the makeup, with the blood on the hands, she's got a vampire kind of look going on. That's cool. Like it's a vibe. It's cool. It looks good. So I dig it. This looks really nice. Styling wise, it looks cool. Like it feels like a Halloween kind of vibe to me. Couple of things that I personally would look at, again, kind of piggybacking on the last photo, the eyes being really far off to the side. I would maybe have her look directly at the camera. If she's going to look off camera, her head needs to turn a little bit more in that direction to look that way. Because I don't think naturally people do that, right? Like if let's say if I'm building a story around this image, she's a vampire, she just mauled somebody that she found and drained their blood, was pulling out their organs, doing whatever it is vampires do. And she's looking at the mess and the havoc that she's made. I don't know that she would be going like this, because this hurts. Like, do it yourself. You're watching this right now, right? For all of you watching online, do this. Does that feel weird? Like that? I feel like that hurts my face. Like it hurts the muscles in my face to do that. So naturally, if I put myself as the vampire in this story, just maul the person off screen, I'm going to be looking at them, right? I'm going to be looking at them. And maybe my nose is pointing this way, and maybe my eyes are still pointing a little bit this way, but I'm not going to do this. Like, this is what you do when you're sitting at a table, right? And you don't want someone to notice that you're looking at them. You do one of these numbers, like you're sitting next to somebody and they like pass gas or something. And you're like, dude, did you right? That's what we do. But if you're looking at something off camera, you're probably going to be like, "What in the world was what?" Right? You're looking wherever it is that whatever it is that caught your attention. You're looking in that direction. So I'm saying all of this to be silly, but also to drive home this point that if somebody's looking off camera, you want to make sure that it makes sense and people don't jam their eyes into the corners of their eye sockets, generally speaking, unless they're trying to look at something and not be noticed. So in this case, the person that she mauled, who cares if they're looking at her because they're dead. You know what I mean? So storytelling, right? These are the things that go through my mind when I see it. What takes me out of the image is just the eyes being off in the corners. The other thing I would look at too is just the composition. You have some negative space on the camera left side of the image. Camera right, it's oh so close to being cut out. So again, just take that composition and just nudge it over to the side to where you have equal amounts of negative space on the left and right. And you might even be able to fix that in post. You might be able to just extend the canvas in Photoshop and then copy that little strip of background in between the edge of the photo and her arm and just extend it out a bit and then cut the other side. And you have like a more well-balanced image. But other than that, cool model, cool vibe, cool story, cool lighting. Just tweak that. And I think you'll see it makes a pretty big difference in the final result. So well done at Shop by Sanchez. Let's go to the next one here. This is what the lights showed me on Instagram. And yeah, so very cinematic vibe to this photo, which I think is because of the lighting. Looks like there's a flash that is behind the subject's head. You can kind of see the round. I don't know, is the mouse showing up on there? No, it's not. You've got just behind her hair, you could see the round, looks like it probably is the reflector of the light. So yeah, I mean, it's got a cinematic vibe to it. It looks pretty cool. Her expression is good. She's kind of doing the whole like playing with the hair, making it messy. Like that looks cool. So a couple of things. Again, toning wise, like this looks cool. I'm actually seeing the thumbnail. So the view that you're seeing on the screen is just like the image, but I see like all of Lightroom on this. So I've got like the small thumbnail to the left. When I see the thumbnail, and this is one of the things that I always look at, if the thumbnail looks cool to me to where I want to click it and see it full screen, that's a good thing. So like I'm seeing the thumbnail and it looks really cool. It almost, when I look at the thumbnail small, it looks like there's like white orbs that are floating, maybe from like an atmospheric dust that's in the room. But then when I see the full image, I notice that it's actually just holes that are in the shed. And maybe it's just like bokeh, basically. So I don't know how feasible it would be, but like, and again, some of this stuff, like, it's like it would be cool if it was like this, but it would have been awesome to maybe have like a hazer or something like that in this barn to where you add a little bit of atmosphere to the room. Or if there's any kind of dust or something like that to where you can kick up a little bit of dust to where the light that's coming through starts to go through this like haze to where it creates this atmosphere, right? Because to me, the lighting looks really cool. Her expression looks really cool. I feel like for me, what's missing, given the location, is atmosphere. You could even buy, like if you go to, I'm pretty sure B&H has it. You can buy atmospheric aerosol. This would be a spot where like I would go behind her and I would just like spray the place up with atmospheric haze. And, it's going to do some really cool things with the lights that are coming from behind her and just add to the vibe and the mood of this location. Other than that, the other thing that I would say too is like, be careful with her hand. She's got the way she's posed, and I can't do it because I'm on stream, but she's got her hand across her stomach and it's in between her legs. And it looks like she's propping her boot up. but you're not seeing the whole hand. You're just seeing fingers. So, you know, just look out for that, right? That hand needs to have more purpose within this image. I don't know that, you know, if you walk up on somebody in this type of scene in real life, right? I always picture when I see a cinematic image, I picture like, okay, if you saw this person in real life, you walked in on this barn, they're sitting here like this, they're doing this thing with their hair, all of that, I'm sold, right? Like this is something that you could walk up on and see in real life. What you won't see is somebody with their arms in between holding up their leg or holding up the boot. So that creates a disconnect for me as the viewer. I would just find she would have to pose some other way with that, with the arm that's closest to the camera, whether it be that, you know, maybe she forms another triangle with that arm, you know, having the arm like something like this. You'd have to play around with this a little bit to like find the pose that works for her body type. I think that's something where, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, what pose would I use? Well, the pose that you would use for her might be a pose that you may not use for somebody else, and vice versa. So having a repertoire of different poses that you can draw on to have people kind of play into those poses, that's something you want to look out for. So, but all of that aside, cool image, cool lighting, good location, technically really nice shot. And yeah, really well done. Just get some atmospheric aerosol. I don't know if you have access to this location, but go back to it and shoot in there, because that's really cool. I like it. Let's go to the next one here. So this is at Bridge Shoots on Instagram. And so first things first, the image has impact. I love black and white images. I love black and white portraits. And the processing on this, just, it's good. Like it's really nice, well done black and white. Her hands look graceful. They look elegant. They look beautiful. Like the posing of the hands is very well done. Her expression is really nice. You notice how, given the angle, how she has her head tilted like this, she doesn't have her eyes centered. She has her eyes looking at the camera, and it works because she's looking at you. She's looking at the camera. The head is tilted just enough and the eyes are tilted just enough to the camera to where, even though her eyes are in the corners, for this pose, for this shot, it totally works. So kudos for that, not going crazy with that. You know, having that light from behind and just kind of like lifting up the shadows in post. I think that's the other thing that makes it kind of cinematic, is that you've got, you know, the light, it's brighter farther away from the camera than it is up close, which is really nice. So all of that for me, it works. She almost to me looks like Natalie Portman, you know, like she's got, and let me know in the chat if y'all agree with me, but she's got like Natalie Portman vibes. You know, it's like she's on stage or something, and you know, has like a strong you know, light behind her. So really well done. So I will say that it's a well executed headshot. Again, you know, looking at this and just trying to like nitpick a shot that's already really good. The first thing, I always pop up my rule of thirds grid, and you know, again, generally speaking, a person's eyes go towards these intersecting points on the rule of thirds grid. So if you see, based on the way that this is composed, my eyes may, they didn't, but they may, based on the rule of thirds grid, potentially go towards her nose. So this would be one where maybe I would not shoot it with a 135. Maybe I would shoot this with like 100 or a 105 or an 85 or a 90, or just use a 70 to 200, to where you can get the same shot, but maybe have these eyes a little bit closer to these intersecting patterns here, or this intersecting line. I wouldn't necessarily bring the composition up to do that, because I love the hands. Like I love the, you know, positioning of the hands. It looks really good. But again, this shot as is looks really good to me. The other thing too is maybe the hands being cut off here on the edge of the photo. Partly, I feel like maybe, again, if you use a little bit of a wider lens, you might be able to get away with it. But if not, just moving the composition like a smidge camera right, that could also make a little bit of a difference. But, again, looking at this shot, is really well done, really well lit, well processed. It's got impact. It's got a mood. It's got a vibe. Like this is a great headshot, great portrait. Very, very well done. Thank you for submitting that. Let's go to our next one here. This is at Vic RH Pics. And yeah, so again, another black and white back to back. Totally by accident too, because I just dumped these all into Lightroom. But yeah, so again, another black and white photo. I'm a big fan of black and whites. I mean, both of these photos, the ones that we just looked at, you don't know when they were taken. They could have been taken a long time ago. They could have been taken 10 minutes ago, right? So I just love the like classic nature of a black and white. It's kind of interesting. So whenever I see black and white photos and I see faces that look, how could I put this? That look intense, I guess. That also is interesting visually. I don't know what it is, but like there's just an intensity that, or an added intensity that you see in a black and white image that you may not see, or that doesn't translate as much in a color image. And so in this shot, the intensity that the subject has towards the camera, it looks cool. Like, again, it just looks like a really timeless image. So well processed, interesting subject. For me, the things that I would look to maybe modify or adjust in the future would be the overall, a few things. The first thing would be the composition. So again, if I put the rule of thirds grid, you have the eyes pretty much in the center of the grid here. For me personally, if I'm shooting these types of headshots, I would have the eyes up closer to the top of that rule of thirds line. And it doesn't have to be directly in the center, but just somewhere a little above, a little bit below, but like in that vicinity, because that's where my eyes are naturally going to, and I'm being met by forehead. So you want to make sure that you compose it in such a way to where you're forcing the viewer to look where you want them to look. So that's the first bit of feedback. The second thing is, if you look at the exposure on the forehead and the nose is a little bit brighter. Not even a little, it's a lot brighter than the exposure on the eyes. And so, as a viewer, I'm going directly to the forehead because that's the brightest part, number one. Number two, that's where the rule of thirds is lining up. So you want to make sure that you're controlling the light a little bit. It appears that this is natural light. So I would maybe have brought this composition down a little tiny bit and maybe have her tilt her head up a tiny bit to where her eyes are catching more of the light. And I think just those two things alone would make for like a much, much better, like 30% better shot. The other thing too is like, and this is tricky. You have a dark background. She has dark hair. So the exposure on like the bottom left and right of the image, it looks pure black to me. And then on the top left and top right, I mean, there's a little distinction between the background and the hair. But it's not, because it's black and white and the way it's processed, it's really hard to tell. So it almost goes into like floating face territory with the portrait because of the exposure of the hair blending into the background. It's a little too close. So you want to look out for that. Look out for your backgrounds. Make sure that you have, if you've got a dark haired person, that you maybe put them on a bit of a lighter background. If you're going to do a black and white, just make sure that there's an obvious separation between the person's hair and the background so that visually it doesn't look like it's just a face that's floating in an image. But with that aside, you were on the right track with this image. Like, really interesting shot. Just a striking portrait, like the elements of a really great portrait are here. Just those small little adjustments. And again, I think that you're in the ballpark of like some really good stuff. So great work. And let's see. So next shot here, we've got Zap Photography TZ. And before I critique this image, if you're watching this right now, do me a favor. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button on this post, on this video, because it makes a big difference. You know, it was really funny. I posted this when I schedule these live streams. I go into my software and I could choose like, okay, I want the live stream to start at 1 o'clock, but it shows up publicly so that it notifies people that I'm going to be going live. And literally the minute that I hit the button to say that I was going to go live at 1 o'clock, the video is not up because it's early. We haven't even started the live stream and somebody already disliked it. There was literally 0 likes and 1 dislike. And I'm like, how are you going to dislike a stream that hasn't even started yet? But that's just the way it goes on YouTube. There's a lot of trolls. There's a lot of haters, you know, for no reason other than just like being silly. So listen, if you want to help out, if you found anything that I've talked about so far helpful in any kind of way, do me a favor, like the video. You don't need to share it. You can if you want, but you don't need to do anything. You don't need to share. You don't need to do, you know, super thanks or anything like that. Just like the video. It takes 2 seconds. All right, let's move on. And thank you if you did that. So Zap Photography TZ, let's take a look at this shot. So looks like it was 105 millimeter f5, 1/200th of a second, ISO 100. So I'm going to venture to guess off camera flash. Maybe a bride, I'm going to guess, with beautiful attire, great makeup, just dark background. This is a beautifully, I don't know if this would be the right way to describe it, but it's like, it's a beautifully haunting shot. Like with the black background and the white and the way that she's holding the veil, it's beautiful. Like it's a timeless, very beautifully crafted image. There's a lot going for this shot. I like it a lot. So maybe for this one, again, this is one of those where like if I delivered this to the bride, I wouldn't expect for them to say anything other than just like, wow, that was good, right? But as photographers, we look at things and we're trying to like find ways to be able to improve things. So for me, again, going back to some of the critiques that I gave earlier, the brightest part of the image is where your eyes are going to go. In this case, the brightest part of the image is the veil on camera left side, and it's to the point to where it's like it looks like it could be overexposed, right? Like if we see up close here, I mean, it's just like it's glowing white. So you know, this would be something that I would look at. The lighting on her looks really nice. I would just maybe try to scrim that light, or to add some kind of like a flag or something to cut some of that light that's hitting her dress so that it's not so bright. I mean, that's really the only thing. Like I feel like overall this image is really nice. There has to be a bright component to this image. I kind of would have preferred for the brightest part to be her face, obviously with it being a portrait, but you know, again, that's really nitpicky. If I see it as a thumbnail, it looks great. It looks fine. I also think too, and again, I don't know where this was photographed, but I would also maybe consider doing this on a background that's maybe not pure black, only because the black and white nature of this, it almost, again, like I said, it's hauntingly beautiful. I think that's part of it for me. I feel like this image could be scarier. Like if you were to do, what was it? There's that movie La Llorona. It looks like it could be like a poster for that if she was dressed differently and like a completely different character, right? So that's where I say it's hauntingly beautiful, because this same setup, if I took somebody and I dressed them in like more gothic attire, it would work for that too. And it's not for anything other than just the light that's on the subject and the dark background. So this would be one where maybe I would have her on like a textured background of some sort. I'm even thinking like, you know, again, if this was a venue, like I'd try to find like a background that maybe had some like really nice texture in the background. and just have them on that. But, you know, again, that's really nitpicky. Like, if I delivered this shot, I would expect nothing but like, wow, this is beautiful. So, you know, with that being said, really, really nicely done. Only other thing I would tell you is just like consider different backgrounds. You know, black backgrounds work pretty well for something like this, but it also could give, like, because it's so sharp and defined, it could look like a cutout a little bit. So having that textured background will maybe change things up a little bit, but really beautiful shot, like really beautiful shot. Well done. Let's go to the next one here. So this one's at All About Portraits. And let's see, f4 says 57.5 millimeters, f125, ISO 200. So a few things. We were talking about painterly images earlier, and that right there is a painterly shot, right? It's got a vibe to it. It's got this Vanity Fair kind of toning and color to it. So just from a retouching perspective, from a lighting perspective, the lighting is really well done. Styling is really well done. The set design, if there was specific set design, it looks really good. So all of that is fantastic. If I was to critique this, which I am, you probably already know what I'm going to say. Actually, you know what? Before I say it, in the chat, what do you think I'm going to say about this image? I'm going to give you all like 30 seconds. Go ahead and type what's the first thing that I would say about this image based on the feedback of the rest of my shots. Let me know while I drink this little sip of water. Okay, see a few coming through. All right. Yep. All right, good. I'm glad there's some people here that have been listening to my critiques. This is wonderful. All right, so a few of you are saying that it's the eyes. Some of you are saying it's the light in the background. Some are saying it's the composition. So all of you are right. But the main thing that I'm looking at is the eyes, right? For me, the eyes take me out of the image for all the reasons that we talked about earlier. She's looking away from the camera. Again, it's not natural for people to look that far off or to have their eyes so far into the corners of their eyes unless they're doing the things that we talked about earlier. If they are doing that, especially in a composition like this where they're in a room, give them something to look at, right? So if they're doing something like that and maybe there's some, you know, person off camera that is dressed up super dapper like they are and they're looking at them, you know, you could have that person in the frame as well or in the composition, but then the shot's not about the subject, then it's about that person, right? So to me, I guess that's really what I'm saying is when I see a shot like this and they're looking off camera, to me, the subject is no longer the person I'm looking at in this photo. It's whoever she's looking at. Does that make sense? Like, and now I want to see them and I can't see them because you're not showing them in the photo. So that's the one thing I would say. If she had her head or her eyes the same way that she's posed right now, but if she had her eyes towards the camera, holy cow, like amazing. Like it's already amazing. It's already a really nice shot, but it would just be that much better if she's just engaging with the camera, you know. And like I've been saying, if you didn't catch the beginning of this, you know, the first few minutes of a photo shoot, a lot of the shots look like this and they get better as you get more comfortable with the camera and you start really dialing in those expressions and looks, right? Your photos are going to get better. So that would be the one thing. Composition wise, some of you said composition. You know, you've got the top of the rule of thirds here. I actually don't mind the composition as much. It could work if her expression caught me, right? Like if her expression caught me, I think it could work. I don't know if this image was maybe cropped because it doesn't look like it's a 3:2 aspect ratio. Looks like maybe it was cropped a little bit on each side. Um, so maybe there was something on either edge that just like didn't look great. But if I'm going to do this type of shot, I would have the person lined up with this right line here on the rule of thirds grid. Just bring that person over more, or bring your composition over to where you have them lined up that way. So that way it's blatantly obvious, like, hey, this is where I want your eyes to look, because you do have that lamp back there, which is adding to the it's a practical light, it's adding to the atmosphere. It gives a reason for like the warm tones that are in the image. So like that works. And especially with her hair color and everything, like from many perspectives and many angles, this is like a masterfully done portrait. Like it's very well done. I just wish she was looking at me, like as the viewer. And I feel like that would just take this from being like a really nice portrait to like she's a superstar and she should be on like Vanity Fair somewhere, like be on the cover. It's a really well done shot. So keep rocking it. If you have access to this location again, you need to use this location again, because that is a really amazing spot. So super well done. Nicely done. Thanks for submitting. And yeah, let's look at this next one. So this is Eli Dreyfus Studios, my buddy Eli, who has been helping me with video over the course of this past year. So what's up, Eli? Told you I'd get to your photo. So let's take a look at this one. So we've got soulful musician, composer, conductor, Mark, I believe that's Sector. Could be wrong. And so this image looks really cool. This is what I don't know if this guy, I mean, I would assume this guy, performed somewhere. If I went to his performance, I feel like this is like what I would see on the poster for his performance outside of a venue. Like it's a really nicely lit shot. Well composed, well processed. The tones of the image has like a cinematic type of vibe to it. So overall looks really, really nice, like really cool shot. Couple of things for me that I would look at. And again, for a shot like this, if this was my client and he told me, hey, I needed a photo for, like I'm doing these performances, I need something to market myself. If I deliver this to him, he's going to love it. I'm going to love it. We walk away and we call it a day. It's only on that following day, right? That Monday morning quarterback comes in and says, it was cool, but I could have done this and I could have done that. Right. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing the Monday morning quarterback because they're going to be happy with the shot. I'm going to be happy with the shot. But as a creative, we always want to push and get things to be even better. So first things first, looking at the rule of thirds, if I put this up, I have that column, right? It's got some light on it. It's bright. And it's in that rule of thirds grid. He is slightly off. So that would be the first thing that I would recommend, is to make sure that your subject in this case, especially when you have strong lines in the composition, to make sure that the person is in the right spot for the rule of thirds. And I say the right spot, not that there's a right or wrong, but for me, I would like for him to be in that rule of thirds intersection on that top right, or sorry, top left. So that would be the first thing. And again, being very nitpicky. Second thing that I would say is have him, this is a little one, but have him place his left foot down. So I'm not seeing the bottom of his shoe because of the fact that it's in shadow. If I look at this from far away, he looks like he has like a giant foot. Like he looks like he's got like big cushy winter shoes on or something like that. Like the shape of the really nice shoes that he's got on, it's misshapen because I'm actually seeing the bottom of his foot, right? And I got to look really close, but if I'm far away, so this is something I recommend to everybody, especially when you're doing location portraits like this. We're used to working with these images and we're like a foot to 2 feet away from the screen, or even closer sometimes when we're retouching and culling images. Um, Once you've picked the image that you think looks good, look at it as a thumbnail, which in this case, if I look at it as a thumbnail, I could see that foot looks very big. And it's not very big. It's just I see the bottom of the shoe, and I can't realize that until I see the bigger image and I can zoom into it. So look at it small. And then when you pull up the big image, right, the full size image like you guys are viewing on this screen, I would back away from the shot and look at it from a distance, right? And just see, what do I see, right? If I back away from this shot, what do I see? Well, the foot still jumps out at me because I can't tell that his foot is like crooked unless I get up close and I see, oh, he's bending his foot, you know, and like he's just super casual, like just chilling, killing the sacks, you know. So that's something that I would look at. The other thing too is looking at that column, and when I put the rule of thirds grid up, it looks like the lines are a little bit off. So this is something where for me, I don't know if you do this, we've never talked about it, but I always put the rule of thirds grid on in my viewfinder so that when I take a photo, if there is something like a column, a wall, something with like a defined line where your eyes would notice it as being something that should be upright, just make sure that you're getting those lines to be as straight as possible. Sometimes you could fix those kinds of things in post, but most of the time you can't. Like you can't take the image and invert it without making the person then look like they're about to like fall out of the image. So that's the only other thing. And the other thing I would say too is because you have that backlight on the left, strobing, it adds a cool little flare, but then you also have like the flare on the top right. And I don't know, like my brain wants to just see one, if any at all. The two light flares are throwing me off just a little tiniest bit. And the last thing, of course, being that column is bright, and the exposure of the column on the right that intersects with that rule of thirds grid is brighter than your subject. It's brighter than Mark. So I would maybe tone down the exposure of the highlights rather on this column. So maybe just select the column in post and just dial down that exposure and make it to where the exposure drops us off as viewers on his face. And yeah, like those are just little tiny things, but like I say, it's got a cinematic vibe to it. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy was a performer and he, you know, used this as his like poster, his banner image. Like it's really well done. So good job, Eli. Thanks for sending that through. All right. And then now, next one here from @DavidL.Morel. Let's see. I guess I don't have the EXIF data. Okay. So a few things. Toning looks interesting. You got kind of a cool tone to the image, which I feel looks it looks interesting. I like that. His expression as he's smoking whatever that is that he's smoking. I don't smoke, so I don't know. Let me know in the chat whatever that is. But yeah, it's an interesting expression. It's interesting tones. He's got, you know, the tattoos going, like he's an interesting looking dude, which is pretty cool. So a few things for me. The smoke being so strong over the camera right eye for me is a little bit distracting. Especially if I look at the thumbnail, it looks like he just has one eye, and it looks like his camera right eye might be like sewed up or something. Like you can't see the eye because of the smoke. But looking at the thumbnail, it throws me off a little bit. It's like he's a one-eyed person, and he's not. He's got two. So and this happens. It's tough when you're taking portraits of people where they have like a thick white smoke, and he was saying he was smoking something illegal. So yeah, I was gonna say that's some white smoke there. So you know, and that's fine. But when you're photographing somebody with any kind of smoke in front of them, especially when it's a thick smoke like that, sometimes there's a little bit of timing, a little bit of luck, maybe both, involved in making sure that the smoke is in such a place and such a position that it's not taking away from the subject. So that would be the one thing I would say for this one that takes me a little bit out of the image is just the smoke covering the eye. Lighting wise, the exposure on the side of his face looks a little tiny bit hot. I don't know if you lit this with a flash or speed light or LED or what it was, but camera right exposure on his face, which you might need because you're lighting the smoke to some extent. But the exposure on his face is a little bit bright. So I would maybe dial down the highlights if you have this as a raw file. Take down the highlights on the side of the face. Although the better thing to do would be to just control the light when you're taking the photo, so that you have a more kind of balanced exposure that you can play with later on in post. Because for me, I think that's what it is like for me, because the brightest side of the face is the side where I can't see his eye, I'm out of the image already because I see the shot and I can't see his eye and I'm like, okay, on to the next one. And so I talk about this quite a bit with my portrait work and with portraits in general, especially the really good ones that I see in like everyday life. What we're trying to achieve and what I think is the goal, should be the goal of a portrait photographer in 2022 going into 2023 and beyond, is to create images that capture people, that stop people from whatever it is that they're doing and make them want to engage with the photo, even if it's just for like 2 or 3 seconds. Getting somebody to be able to stop and look at the photograph is the most important thing with portrait photography. It's one of, maybe not the most, but it's one of. And so for me, if I look at this image and the brightest part of the face is a part that I can't see or that I can't distinctly make out, I'm not going to stop. I would just move on, look at the next image. Just say if I was scrolling on Instagram or something like that. So the way that you can manipulate that is just by making sure that the light is lighting the things that you want it to light. In this case, hopefully it should be the eyes, maybe the smoke, because that is part of the character that he's giving to the camera. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, like if I held my hand over that half of the image and just saw the other half, I would say it's an interesting photo. But then when I see that eye being covered up by the smoke and then I see the overexposure on the side of the face, I'm like, man, could have been, right? So really well done. Just tweak those few things when you do your shots. Just look at the shot and just say really quickly, where are my eyes going? And is that where I want to look? And is that where I want people to look? And is it the most interesting thing in the photo, right? To me, when there's a person in the photo, that person is the hero. That's who I want people to look at. He might be smoking, he might be doing something else. That's cool. That's all an element. That's a part of the story. But visually, I want people to look at the subject. So really well done, though. Tones look great. Concept is really interesting. Just keep those things in mind for the next time. So really well done. All right. So now we've got at Sammy. Oh boy, Sammy Turunen Photography. I probably brutalized that, but yeah. So can we stop for a second and just say, like, this is art. Like this is art right here. This is really, really interesting, really cool shot. Fantastic lighting. I'm gonna guess this is like yeah, this is like I wanted to do a photo shoot like this a while back. It's basically like glow in the dark makeup. If I'm wrong, maybe I'm wrong, but when I was going to do this and I was talking to my makeup artist, it's a kind of makeup that glows in the dark. So you've got that going on in the background. I don't know how you did the background, if it's projection or if it was done in post, but like this is a really cool shot. This is a beautiful portrait. Great lighting on the subject. The makeup looks really cool. Whoever it is, kudos to the makeup artist if this is makeup and did this. Kudos to them because this is really cool. And it's always funny to me when I see stuff like this, like being in the studio. Let's say if I photograph this, it's always funny because like the models will leave. Oftentimes they have their regular makeup that they had for the shoot, and it's perfectly fine to, like, you know, when I lived in New Jersey, New York, they'd take the subway back home or take the train, and no one would pay any attention. Can you imagine, you go to a photo shoot, you're the model, and you got to go home and you have like flowers and stuff all over? Like, people are going to look. It's an eye-catching visual thing. So, um, props to the model for being a trooper, to have this art displayed on her. But just the makeup is really well done. The lighting is really well done. Um, yeah, this is a really nice shot. I feel like the only little thing, and again, I almost don't want to say it because it's such a nice shot. The only little thing for me is the amount of negative space on the top part of the image. There's a good maybe 10% of the image that's just literally like purple background. I don't need it. Like, if I'm reading it now from top to bottom. So let me back up. Oftentimes when I look at an image, I'm reading it from left to right. Next up, I read it from like top to bottom. So for me, when I go from top to bottom, as I'm looking through the image, there's just a lot of purple up there that I feel like all the artistry is on the background. It's on the subject. So maybe just cutting out that, 10% of the top. I feel like it's not really helping that much. Again, if I put the rule of thirds grid up here, the rule of the top line is intersecting right across the mouth. That's fine. Like I say, composition wise, it looks cool, but I feel like if I was to crop this top part out, maybe the composition would be a little tiny bit different. But either way, it's a small nitpick. Otherwise, this is a fantastic shot. Like, it's great. I'm a fan. That looks really, really nice. Someone was asking, what's your go-to lens for portraits? Mine personally is probably a 70 to 200 these days, just because you could do so much with it. But if you ask me 10 minutes from now, it'll probably be different. So, but yeah, really, really nice image. I don't have the exif data on this one, but yeah, just really, really nice shot. Very well done. All right. Next one here is from Donrick Pond Photo. And yeah, so interesting shot, interesting lighting. Looks like maybe she might be a bride potentially, or maybe she's just, really just well-dressed person in day-to-day life. So lighting looks really cool. Subject looks really good. She's got a great expression. It's processed nice. I think for this particular shot, some of the things that I would look at is her pose would be the first thing. So her face looks like she's giving you a good expression, which is like 95% of what I want to see in a portrait personally. Like, she's giving it, and that's great. So if I just put my hand over the rest of the image and I just see her face, the expression she's giving to the camera, I'm like, good, this is what I want. As I continue down the image, talked about this on another image prior, but her having her arm across her waist, I think it would have looked a little bit better if she would have done something different with that hand, whether it be, again, doing one of these numbers on the side of her body where she's making another little triangle shape. That could look really beautiful. Her kind of playing with the fabric of the dress on that side would have looked really cool. So the arm for me is a little bit distracting. The other thing too is she's I guess she's gonna punch me. I'm not sure, because she's giving me the little, like, if you could see, the little look, right? Like you looked and now you get punched. She looks like she's doing that to me right now, and I feel like, oh dang it, she got me, right? So just keep in mind the hands, just watch out for that. I think oftentimes when I take a portrait, and if I see them giving like a really good expression, sometimes I kind of like get out of the image a little bit, and I'm like, oh wow, this is really working out, this is great, and I lose some of the details just because I'm so excited that I'm getting somebody who's not wandering and looking off into the distance. So that's pleasing. I like the fact that I'm seeing that. But just watch out for the hands, watch out for the fingers, especially because you've got the lens flares there. I feel like I'm looking at her. She's got the sun behind her, and then she's pointing at the lens flare. So from a storytelling perspective, I don't know what's happening. I don't know that it's maybe it needs to be explained to me, but like from a pure storytelling perspective, I there's a disconnect there because I don't know what she's doing and I don't know why she's doing it. So again, this is being very nitpicky because she probably got this shot and was like, yes, this looks great, because it is a great shot. But the storytelling components is what takes these images up a notch and makes it just the slightest bit better, which is really what this whole live stream is about. It's about making images just a little bit better. The other thing for me, and again, this is one where like I would have to play around with the raw file and like just look at it. But you know, we're getting this setting sun, and we have this certain color temperature that we expect to see with a setting sun, but the color temperature that we have on our subject from the lighting is different. It's a cooler color. So this would be something where like I would maybe gel the flash so that I can match it a little bit more towards the light source, because you're telling everybody in this shot what the light source is in a way, even though the light on the face is different. But you're telling them this is a light source, it's the sun. But the color temperature on the subject tells me that maybe it's a lamp, right? Like it's something that's a different color temperature. So if that's the case, I need to see a lamp. I need to be able visually to look at it and be like, oh, she's being lit by a corner lamp or something. And that needs to be somehow made a part of the composition so that my brain understands this is where the light on the subject is coming from, if it's not that big sun that's behind her. Does that make sense? Like I have to be able to know that there's some other light source that's lighting the subject, and that's why the color temperature is different than what my brain wants to see, which is the color temperature of a, you know, setting sun. But with that being said, other than that, great shot. Looks like maybe it was high speed sync. So just a really beautiful location, great model. Just killing it with the expressions. If you can get her back to do some more photos, and just tweak those few things, this is already a portfolio worthy shot, but I think you've got more opportunity and more room to get even better stuff. So nice work. And so here is the next one here. This is Johanna's J Photography, and another black and white, beautiful shot. Again, huge fan of black and white images because they just have a timeless quality to it. Styling is really interesting. Always a fan of having these types of photos where you have a lot of like cool props, flowers, things of that nature. Technically, the exposure is controlled really nicely. She's lit really well. She looks like she's got some interesting makeup on the side of her eye. All of that looks really, really nice. So if I'm looking at this shot, I think for me, her expression could maybe, let me see. So, okay, so let me start off this way. When I saw the photo to begin with, I'm looking at the smaller thumbnail, which you can't see on the stream, and then I see the big photo on the side. When I look at the smaller thumbnail, her expression, she looks like she's looking at me directly, and that she's got kind of like a almost like a longing expression on her face, which looks beautiful. But then when I see the larger photo and I'm looking directly at it, I almost feel like her gaze is not as engaged with the camera as maybe it looks to be on the smaller thumbnail. So, you know, this is one where like I would just really have, you got to talk to them. You got to continue to just get different expressions, different poses out of them. If I saw this shot, and I always tell people as I'm working with them and posing them, I will tell them that if I start talking to you and I have the camera up to my face, don't move, because I may want you to make just like the slightest adjustment. And what I don't want you to do is like, I say, hey, let's try something, or hey, can you? And as soon as I stop and take the camera away from my face, that you just go from here to like, huh, what? right? I don't want people to do that. So I'll tell them, if you hear me talking while you're posing, don't move. It's not the first instinct, but like, don't move, because what I need you to do is I might just need you to like close down a little bit on your expression, on your eyes, and just really look towards the center of the lens and just make that small little adjustment, because everything else is perfect. Just that little change again will add another 5 or 10% more brownie points, to an already really, really nice portrait. So this one looks really cool. The expression, I think, is the only little tiny thing that I would maybe want to adjust. Um, yeah, so you see on the rule of thirds grid, the top left line, she's kind of off to that side. The eye is exactly, intersected with that line magically, mysteriously. um, but yeah, that's great. That looks really cool. It's composed really nicely. Great use of props. Like I say, this is one of those where like I feel like the more that you're shooting with your subject and the more they warm up, you're going to take the shot and it's going to get incrementally better as she starts to engage more directly with the lens. Because everything else, like lighting wise, prop wise, makeup wise, subject wise, styling wise, hair wise, like every other wise that you can think of, it's there in the image. Now it's just a matter of your subjects dialing it in and just looking at the camera and owning the hell out of that camera, right? Just owning it. Like, this is my photo. I'm going to slay it right now. And that takes time. Even for like professional models, it takes time. But otherwise, really beautiful, really amazing portrait. I'm going to go into the chat here because I believe that was the last of our submissions here for the day. But let's go here. Here we go. All right. Perfect. All right. So we have gone through quite a few photographs. So any questions that you all have in regards to any of the feedback that I gave, I want to make sure that I cover any questions for the next like few minutes here. But just kind of going through some of the comments and stuff here. Let's see. Yeah. So again, really quick thing here too, while I'm waiting for any questions to come through. If you watch this live stream, if you got any kind of value whatsoever out of the information, if you feel like it may have helped you to take better portraits, please do me a favor, leave a like on this live stream. We unfortunately live in a time where people like to troll. And so oftentimes, like I said at the beginning of this, before the stream even went live, like the first, like that's just dumb. That's really dumb. How are you going to dislike a live stream before it's even started? So clearly there are trolls out there that just like to be silly and dislike things just to dislike it. And it's literally right now we're sitting at 48 likes with 1 dislike. So that same single dislike that I told you is the only dislike, but we can overwhelm that dislike if everyone just really quickly just left a like on this, and I would appreciate it. You guys got this information for free, and the goal is, so we did this stream today, and I think, and I'll share this with you all, I think what's going to happen is over the course of maybe either potentially starting in January, I'm going to start a membership option here on YouTube. And part of the membership, it's going to be twofold. One of the things is going to be that I'm going to do member exclusive live streams. So when I do my photo shoots, I'm actually going to set up and live stream the photo shoot, similar to how I did the workshop a few weeks ago for with the Rhodolite EOS, to basically do something very similar where I'm just live streaming a photo shoot and I show you all how I do what I do. And I'll do that once a month. And on the months where I don't do that, we're going to do critiques like we did today, which are going to be member only critiques. And I think that there's a lot of value. I know even for me, you might think that it doesn't work out this way, but even for me, looking at these portraits and critiquing them, I also get inspiration, information, just seeing the way that everybody else creates their images. And so there's just a lot of value in not only having your work critiqued, but in watching other people's work get critiqued. Because oftentimes, you look at a photo and you're like, oh, that's a perfect image. I don't see how it could be any better. Very few people do that because everyone's got opinions, right? But there are some people who look at photos and they're like, this is perfection. And it's like, well, hold on, pump the brakes a little bit. It's pretty good, but you could do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Some of that might be valid. Some of it might just be like people's personal taste. But some of that might be very relevant, important information that actually could make your work better. So, the live stream is really, really helpful for that. Just being able to see the opinions and hear the opinions and hopefully apply some of those things. So let's see. So Sean was asking, what color paper backdrop would you recommend for a darker skinned woman? So that's a good question. I don't think that there's necessarily any specific color in terms of skin tone. I guess generally speaking, if I look back over my photo shoots, I photographed dark and light skin on all kinds of colors. I photographed dark skin on light blues, on whites, on blacks, grays. So I don't know if necessarily the color of their skin would affect so much my choice of background color. However, what would dictate that a little bit more would be, what are they wearing? What color is the stuff that they're wearing? What color is their makeup? If they have any other props and things of that nature, that tends to guide me a little tiny bit more in terms of like, what color backgrounds am I going to choose than like what color is their skin. Like I'm less concerned with that. And just more concerned with just making sure that, whatever color that background is, that it complements whatever it is that they're wearing. So, because I can like the person's skin, however, like I could add, lighting to them. I can add colored lighting to their skin, things of that nature. So, so I'm less concerned with the color of the backdrop for the skin and more concerned with everything else, like what they're wearing, what color their hair is, things of that nature. So there's a video that I put up, and I'll tell you the name of it, but there's a video that I did a while back that has an accessory that I would highly recommend that you get, because this is what I do whenever I'm like trying to figure out what color background do I pick, for example. The way that I figure out how to do it based on what they're wearing, oftentimes I use this accessory, which I'm just going through my videos here on another screen, and I'll let you know what the name of the video is. But it is called, actually, let me see. I can put this in the chat. So it's 5 more must-have photo studio essentials under $200. So I'm going to put this, I put the link in the chat here directly to that video. But you'll see that there's this little accessory that I bought. It's made by Data Color. And you can basically get the exact color of something. So like you put it up to, say, your shirt, and using the app on your phone and using this device, it will tell you what color that swatch is, and it creates like a color palette for you. So it'll tell you what the complementary colors are to that color. And oftentimes if it tells me like, okay, based on the color red that person's wearing, maybe a brownish color or bluish color, whatever it might be like the right complementary color, or color that would go best with that color, then I will look and say, okay, that would be a cool background, right? And if it's not going to be a background, then it's going to be something else. Like I try to incorporate as many of those complementary colors as possible, and that device that's in that video helps you to do that. So highly recommend checking it out. I have a lot of videos on my channel now that I think about this, that have a lot of really cool information that maybe you may have missed. So check out some of the older stuff as well. But with that being said, listen, big thanks to everybody who submitted their portraits for this critique this week. I'm hoping to be able to do this again. If y'all enjoyed it, please follow all the people that submitted portraits on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. The links are in the description of the video. And I will see you very, very soon. Stay safe and love y'all.